Atheist Nomads, episode 246, with Twice the Babies.
The podcast you're about to listen to includes cursing and talking about hoo-haws. Please be advised.
Welcome to another episode of Atheist Nomads. I am Dustin. Joining me is Lauren.
Hello.
We've got Kylie.
Yeah, she's here.
Making periodic noises. And Mary is back with
Hello.
Little Blithe.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
It's been a while.
It has. It's been since before we had babies.
Yeah.
Has it been that long? Oh my gosh, It has.
I haven't done this since before.
Wow.
And it was like a while before too, because I got to like a certain point in my pregnancy where I was like, I cannot commit to doing anything that isn't laying on my couch. So I wasn't doing comedy or anything like that.
Well, the timing actually ended up being, we had you last on, I think it was the second or third to last before Kylie was born.
Yeah, you guys were like
that was
stocking
6 weeks
up
before Blythe was born. So by the time we were back to doing the show, you were in like your final week.
Yeah, that's true. Because I did one like you were like kind of stocking up podcasts in case the baby showed up. Then you'd have some to. Yeah, I do. I remember that now. So five-ish months since I've been on.
November was the last time. Yeah. It is 5 months. Man, time just flies.
Not when you're pregnant. 5 months of pregnancy was like an eternity.
It really,
5 months.
I was like last year, the entire year was just a wash. It was like, forget it.
That's how I felt about it too.
Now I've reached a point where I'm looking back on Facebook memories. It's like a year ago, you found out you were pregnant. I'm like,
Oh, man.
Yeah, so both babies are getting to the point where they're getting pretty talky, huh?
Yeah.
Mine is anyway.
Now, one thing that's been kind of interesting is one show that I just started listening to just had a new baby. And the first episode where I heard all the baby noises, it was kind of distracting. They were talking about deep, serious things, and it was just kind of pulled me out of the moment. But I was also being super hypercritical of it. In episodes since then, they make a point that the baby is there, and then it's fine. It's weird.
Oh, okay. So as long as as a listener you're aware that there's going to be some background noise, then it just doesn't bother you as much as
Now there's also possibly a chance that I'm just telling myself that because we're doing that to our listeners.
You also might be a little more used to baby sounds now too.
Yeah, well,
definitely.
She can definitely start wailing when she wants attention.
Yeah. All right, well, let's go ahead and just jump into the news. Before that, as if you didn't see the announcement on Facebook or Twitter, this was kind of a last-minute decision since I had been hoping to get a little bit more lead up on this. That didn't quite work out. We're moving back to Thursdays for release. Turns out weekends are actually crazy. Life happens all the time for everyone, and weeknights seem to actually be easier for people to plan for. So we're gonna go back to doing this. But in the news, first off, we've got Dave Silverman being placed on leave following a complaint.
Oh, that was like a bombshell.
Yeah. The news hit today. We're recording this on Tuesday. American Atheists. It seems like word got leaked out, and then they started sending out emails to people, to members, letting them know that the board had received a complaint, and David had agreed to go on to leave while they investigate. He is going to be cooperating with the investigation, and that is it.
And that's all we know.
That's all we know. A complaint.
They haven't released anything about what they're investigating.
Nope. That is, we will find that all out later.
Oh, fun.
Yeah.
He's really been doing a lot of public relations stuff going on every show.
We had him on not too long ago.
So this has been like, oh man, please don't be sexual harassment.
Yeah, I know,
please don't be sexual harassment.
It's like we're supposed to be the ones who don't. Do you know what I mean?
And right after the convention too.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's really disappointing to hear that something came up, but they'll be investigating, and we'll find out more later.
Hooray for updates.
And we will definitely talk about it when more news is released. And for some local news, Idaho State Senator Bob Nonini is running for lieutenant governor and took part in a candidate forum with other candidates on the Cross Politics Show and Podcast, which is a Christian political show. All three candidates agreed that abortion is murder. The host, David Shannon, asked if women who get abortions should get the death penalty. And
wow, really? He jumped straight to that?
Yeah.
Not even a lead up to like...
Well, there was a bit more in there while they continued to talk about how abortion is murder. And Nonini's response to that question was, yes, there should be no abortion, and anyone who has an abortion should pay. So obviously he got quite a bit of backlash for saying that women who get abortions should be executed. And so he tried to backtrack on Twitter saying, let me be clear, I have always been a pro-life supporter. That means classifying abortion as murder, and I believe we should consider penalties for individuals involved in these procedures. I never said or agreed the death penalty should be considered. Except he did.
He did. He just backpedaled real hard.
Yeah.
Was my understanding.
Yeah. I can see where maybe he had said yes without thinking it through. And
then think about his audience for a show like that too.
Oh yeah.
You know, like that's what like you'd feel more comfortable being that extreme in your viewpoint.
Well, everybody else here agrees with me, so I'll go ahead and just say yes.
This is what I've got to be the most, when it's that far right, I have to be the most right person, the far right person in this conversation in order to stand out. You don't want to
come across as a softy, liberal,
exactly.
snowflake.
And you don't consider about when everyone else is going to hear about what you said. And realize that it's absolutely ludicrous.
You know, I watched some of Mark Zuckerberg's deposition before Congress, and one of the things that finally clicked for me while listening to that is the biggest problem with targeted advertising is that the advertisers not only get to pick who their target audience is, but make sure that nobody who isn't their target audience sees that. Zuckerberg has a plan to fix that by making all ads public to everyone if you want to go look at it.
Nobody wants to look at ads, but I guess that's a step in the right direction.
It's at least to provide some transparency so that media groups can go and look for it. What Nonini failed to take into account, podcasts fall into the same problems as advertisements on radio and TV did. The passerby. Somebody flipping through the channels on TV or flipping through stations on the radio, not your target audience, can hear you say something terrible and take you to account for it. With a podcast, people might stumble on it, and there are also people who love to listen to shows they disagree with.
Yeah, this is certainly a sick joy in listening to stuff that you love to hate.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I do it. Just like I like to get riled up sometimes. Occasionally. It's rare, but turn on the AM radio.
Yeah,
to see what what's going on. And
at least last time, this may not be current, but Sam Mulvey for at least a long time mostly listened to conservative AM radio or conservative political or Christian podcasts or conspiracy theorist podcasts because he wanted to hear the crazy from the crazies before talking about the crazy. It makes sense.
I respect that.
Yeah.
It takes a certain constitution to be able to do that, which I do not have.
Now, for those of you outside of Idaho who think a statewide candidate would even risk saying that women who get abortions should be executed, need to keep in mind we have a candidate for governor every single time who legally changed his name to pro-life.
Oh, good old pro-life. At it again. Wah wah.
And speaking of running for governor, we've got Harley Brown.
Harley Brown
keeps running.
We love Harley Brown. He is good fodder.
This isn't pro-life, but this is somebody who is quite pro-life and makes for lots of interesting material. He's known for tough talk, dark humor, and foul language. And in an on-the-air confrontation on the radio, he went ahead and explained why he's running. Again, yes. And he said, for proof, he has a 1997 notarized statement from a bishop in Kenya confirming that, quote, God did indeed tell Harley D. Brown that he would make him the commander-in-chief. And since God wants him to be president, he's running for governor. And
in Kenya.
Every year runs for something. This time it's Idaho governor.
He did actually try to run for president, didn't he?
Yeah.
He was like one of those really weird fringe
candidates that didn't make it on very many ballots because...
He did make it into the news, though, because he's crazy.
Yeah.
Good old Harley.
But in Idaho, he will get to be in the debate and probably get mocked on the BBC.
All right.
Yeah, that's going to happen again. Yeah, it's going to be a fun... I suspect the Republican campaign for... The Republican primaries for Idaho governor are going to provide us with plenty of fodder because, well, yeah, we've got a guy named Pro-Life. We've got a guy who said that God wants him to be president, and that's why he keeps running. And we've got Little.
He's actually one of the saner choices.
Uh-huh. Yeah, he's going to win. We're going to go from having Butch to going to Little.
Yeah. Who's just a little Butch.
Uh-huh. And yes, we are making fun with people's names, but they fit. And was also part of the naming of the Little Bitch Otter beer during the last governor's race. They got the Little from Brad Little.
It was pretty good.
Yeah. Well, it was an IPA. So the beer wasn't
The joke was good. It was highbrow humor. Kind of.
It was good, and I'm fairly certain it was good for that brewery's pockets. Because that.
Oh yeah.
Did you guys go to that release party?
No, we didn't.
No, we got there like 2 hours after it started, and they were way sold out. Like way sold out. The place was packed. Like the line was around the block. No beer left.
Wow. Okay, next up we have a crazy Mormon sex scandal.
Again.
Yes. Okay, so this time it was...
I'm excited to see which one we're about to talk about.
Sexual assault allegation against the former president of the Missionary Training Center, Joseph Bishop.
Wow, can you get any more of a Mormon name than that?
I know.
Yeah. So, in response to this, a church contracted lawyer put together a full dossier on the woman who had made the accusation.
But months before it came, or several weeks at least before it was even released. Like they knew this was coming. And instead of being like, let's investigate these terrible crimes, like let's instead make this woman.
Yeah. So they got everything on her criminal record, alleged false allegations she's made in the past, job she's lost, her temple record, all of her church records were included. She was 17 when this happened. Yeah. So then, to make it matters worse, the lawyer then sent this dossier to a number of other lawyers involved in the case, the people the accusations have been made against, and his son, who was also his lawyer, Greg Bishop. And Greg Bishop then sent this to Channel 2 News in Salt Lake City.
What was he hoping to get out of that?
Slandering and discrediting a woman who had made an accusation against his father.
But that backfires terribly when you victim blame like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As they now know.
And I get the instinct, you don't want to believe something that bad about somebody you care about, like your dad. But at the same time, obviously it happened. And stay neutral at the very least. Don't, because he also I think is the same son who came out and said that his dad the admission didn't count, the recording didn't count because his dad was on heart medication that made him admit things. Did you hear about this part?
Oh, I missed that one.
Yeah, he said something like, the heart medication my dad is on makes him say things. It was like, the heart medication he's on makes him admit to rape, or molestation, I guess is what he admitted to. Sexual assault. Yeah. I don't think so, because you'd have a lot of people in their 70s and 80s out announcing they'd done things they hadn't done if that's how it worked.
Yeah. No, clearly what was intended was, they knew that there would be a public backlash from non-Mormons. And in Salt Lake City, there are a lot of non-Mormons. I think they were hoping that if they could paint this woman as being bad, that obviously she's the one to blame, not his dad.
Yeah.
That doesn't, maybe
she was
it
17.
would work.
Yeah, she may have
maybe it would work with some people, but you think
Still
if you
against the law.
break that down logically, like how bad does somebody have to be? How bad, like I say in quotations, for it to be okay for somebody else to assault them? Like, was it to discredit the assault because he admitted to that? Or was it to make it seem like assaulting her wasn't that big of a deal because of her past mistakes? Because that's what it seems like. And that's crazy. Like, if you logically, like, nobody would
and it's
really...
not like you can count anything that happened after she turned 17, because...
It had already happened.
Because, that...
Unless you're just wanting to discredit her as a person and turn juries against her so that...
I just don't see that flying.
They won't find him guilty.
Yeah, well, there are a lot of stupid people out there.
Yep.
Who would go for that? And
Salt Lake, what would you say with your from your time in the Mormon Church? Former head of the Missionary Training Center, you think he'll get off?
I probably, but not just because it's Salt Lake and he's Mormon, but that just seems to be the trend for people who commit sexual assault lately. And
true.
I think it probably helps that he's in Salt Lake and he's Mormon, but I wouldn't say that's the only.
Opposite. I was thinking of any place in Utah. Salt Lake is probably where he has the hardest case.
That's probably true.
There's a larger pool of non-Mormons in Salt Lake City concentrated proper than just about the rest of the state.
Now, I'm going to guess, based on his time at the MTC, that he was probably down in the Ogden, where BYU is, because it's right by BYU. I think that's Ogden.
Ogden, that sounds right.
No, it's Orem. Ogden's north.
It's
or is Orem the one that's north?
Come on. Starts with a P.
Provo.
Thank you.
Yes.
Provo.
I'm going to guess he's probably down in Provo. Yeah. It says right here in the article.
Yeah, he's probably going to get
They would have sent this to a news channel in Salt Lake because that's where the media comes from. Oh, yeah. This will be interesting. And along similar lines, creepy Mormons being creepy, there was a large march in Salt Lake City with people calling for the end to Mormon bishops doing private interviews with children about sex.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Is one of those things. Like, I was raised Mormon and I fully left the church. I was like 21, 22 when I was like fully out. I'm still technically a member. Like, I haven't done all that work just because it sounds like work.
There are lawyers who will help.
Yeah, I know that you can go, like, there's like websites where you can go and you just give them your name and they do the whole thing for you. But part of me is like, I don't want them to know that they got to me. You know what I mean? Like, that I care that much about they don't bug me anymore. They never come around. But I don't know. I probably will eventually get my name taken out of the records. But
if you don't, they'll count you until you're 110.
Seriously?
Yeah.
That's how they hyperinflate their numbers.
They count members from birth at your naming to 110.
There's a lot of super shady ways they inflate their numbers. Like, they just like give people free meals to baptize them in like third world countries and then count them. Yeah. They count like they'll count pretty much anybody as one of it's shady. They're shady. But as far as the interview goes, that was one of those things where I was like 25 or 26, where one day it occurred to me, I was like, that was weird. That was a weird thing that I did every 6 months, or anytime I got a calling from the time I was 12 to the time I left the church. So a couple times a year, starting at 12, that a middle-aged man would ask me if I was sexually pure, which usually stopped at that, but it was at the discretion of the leader I was talking to, as much as far as how deep they wanted to dive into that.
Wow.
Which for the most part in my case was not very deep. And when I turned 12, my dad was my bishop, which was especially uncomfortable, but also especially lucky because, it could have been some weirdo.
Yeah.
But that only lasted a couple years, and then it was another bishop. And, but yeah, it didn't occur to me till I was in my late 20s that is a really bizarre. In what other context would you be okay? Would my parents have been okay with that? With a 40-something-year-old man asking me if I masturbate? It's absolutely insane.
And a person who has zero training.
Mm-hmm. And in some of these cases where they do go deeper, like you said, it gets into some incredibly invasive details.
Yeah.
Like, It's not just, if you masturbate, it's how. It's like, oh man, dude, really? You're going to ask some 12-year-old girl how she masturbates? Like, you want deets?
Which I feel like because of my experience where the questions weren't that invasive, even though I know for a lot of people they were, I feel like because the standard of the church is not necessarily to get that invasive, they leave it up to the leader. Mm-hmm. That if you are a creep. Like there is something that you get off on if you're wanting to dig that deep when you don't have to.
For this article in the Salt Lake Tribune, they talked to a woman who outlined the exact questioning from the last time she got it, because she stopped going after this. She was 18 years old. Her boyfriend had been in the bishop's office for his questioning a week or two before. And so she sat down and he started with some of the normal questions and then moved on to, what time of night do you kiss? Where do you go with your boyfriend? Are you sitting up or laying down? Was any clothing off? And then he asked if she was surprised by what happens when boys orgasm.
What?
Yeah.
By 18, I hope she wasn't surprised, but
that is just a bizarre
question.
Weird question.
That's a really weird question.
He didn't ask her, how do you feel about it? It was, were you surprised?
Uh-huh.
Yeah, this guy is getting his jollies on.
Yeah, for sure.
Getting the details.
Because that's not even a good question for if you're trying to use using some reverse psychology to get the answer. Very leading questions to just get an easy yes, as opposed to forcing the person to just say what's happening. It doesn't even seem like that because it's just bizarre.
Super.
It's just weird.
Yeah.
It is.
And I'm glad that these guys are being called out for it, because this has been going on forever. And
I think that most people were in the position, and probably still are in the position that I was in, where because it was so much a part of the culture and like the day-to-day, like it's just what you did, that you didn't realize it was inappropriate unless you remove yourself or somebody points it out. You don't realize that is incredibly inappropriate to be doing. Yeah. So hopefully this highlights it for people who wouldn't necessarily have thought that it was under other circumstances.
Yeah, kind of pull back the veil a little bit.
Yeah, and realize that it's
like other people don't do this. You know that, right?
Yeah, like this isn't
healthy.
Normal.
It isn't normal.
But one of the things that kind of jumped out at me when I was reading about this was, these bishops are amateurs. I have had more training in how to be a pastor than any Mormon bishop has.
Yeah, that's there's another thing. Oh, so this kind of falls into the same category of all the bishops that came out recently were telling women to stay in abusive marriages.
Yeah.
And it's the same. I think it's the same thing. You're not a trained counselor. Mm-hmm. You're not. And what the LDS people always say is they're like, well, they're called of God. They're inspired by God. They have, that's where their training comes from is the inspiration from God. But then you have people like this bishop guy who was called of God and assaulting people. Mm-hmm. So like how do you know that this one is one of the good ones that was called of God?
He wasn't really called to God. He just thought he was.
Yeah, was one. That was just, there was a reason for that one or whatever. And how do you know there's not a reason for this one? And he's not in there being inappropriate with children, because that's what they are. I mean, the Mormon church is like, you're accountable at 8 and you basically start doing like all your grown up things at 12, but they are legally and morally, in my opinion, they're children. 12 years old is a child. And
and Mormons are proud of the fact they don't have professional clergy. In a normal church, before you get into even remotely a position where something like that might come up, you've gone through 4 years of your undergrad studying it, 3 years of graduate school, and at least 2 years being supervised by a senior pastor before you're set out on your own. 9 years of preparation. For a bishop, one day, God has called you.
And a handbook. You basically you get God called you to this position. Here's the handbook.
Here's your pamphlet. Move along.
Yeah. follow these certain guidelines. But again, the guidelines obviously aren't clear enough. If some bishops are just like, hey, are you morally clean? And some bishops are like, how do you masturbate? Like, there's obviously a breakdown. The pamphlet isn't clear enough.
Yeah.
If that's what's going on.
That, or we just have an instance of middle-aged men abusing their power.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which wouldn't be the first time.
No, we've been seeing a lot of. So this was definitely the right time for this.
Yeah.
Definitely.
I think that between that and the telling women to stay with their abusive husbands, and also the timeliness of this bishop case, the assault case, hopefully it makes them reevaluate the way they do some things. But that's sort of my experience with the Mormon Church is this is how things happen with them. They are never on the forefront of social change. They claim to be the true church, and they have all of these dark things in their past, like racism and all of that. And they're like, well, the world just wasn't ready for that. It's like, well, you're always the last people. You always get dragged kicking and screaming behind social change. You're never on the forefront. So this is going to be one of those instances where they're going to fight this and fight this and fight this until the whole world is against them.
Yeah.
And they have to make the changes in order to stay remotely relevant.
Yeah. Now, unfortunately, what we have since seen is that they weren't actually all that far behind society on racism. They just missed that you weren't supposed to admit that you're a racist or say racist things in public, because that wasn't okay from about 1970 to 2016. Unfortunately, times have changed.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a break. We love hearing from our listeners. You can email us at contact@atheistnomads.com, tweet us @atheistnomads, send us a message on our Facebook page at facebook.com/atheistnomads, or better yet, call us and leave us a message at 541-203-0666. We might even play it on the show. You can also help us out by leaving us a review on iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcast directory of choice. Social scientists Andrew Whitehead, Joseph Baker, and Samuel Perry did an article for the journal Sociology of Religion on Trump and Christian nationalism.
Hot topic.
What they have found is that your view on whether or not Christian is, or the United States is a Christian nation, and more importantly, whether or not it should be a Christian nation, is what determines how likely somebody was to vote for Trump. And this held across party lines.
Oh, wow.
Democrats who believe that the U.S. is and should be a Christian nation were 3 times more likely to vote for Trump than Democrats who didn't think the U.S. was a Christian nation. And the same was true for Republicans, although a little bit stronger on the Republican side.
Like, I'm not surprised, but at the same time, I am. So yeah. I'm shocked that Trump was able to move that many people.
Especially since he is
not religious.
Likely the first non-Christian president we've had since, John Adams?
Yeah.
Well, you think that part of this has to do with, there's this pretty common, part of Christian ideology that the second coming happens at the end of the world, and Trump is most likely to be the kind of president who would bring on an end of world type.
Usher that in. Yeah.
Usher that in. Not that they really probably consciously looked at it like, oh, he's going to end the world, but because of his stance on things and his willingness to, I guess, his lack of diplomacy, almost. Does that make sense? Yeah. What I'm trying to... I didn't communicate that well, but...
One of the things that they point out in this article is that Pence was definitely an important part in that, because Christians, especially Christian dominionists, love Pence. And they all figured, and probably have gotten, Pence calling the shots while Trump is the figurehead, spending all of his time on Twitter.
And golfing.
Yeah, actually spending most of his time playing golf. He golfs, eats McDonald's, watches Fox News, and tweets. That's basically about all he does. That's not being president, which means somebody is actually doing the job of president, and it's not Trump.
Yeah.
So they may have gotten exactly what they wanted.
I was also wondering if maybe it was because the Republican Party itself was building up the pro-Christian demographic so strongly, and then when Trump swooped in at the end and got the Republican nomination, maybe he just jumped on that train and rode it.
That's quite possible. When you look at the actual...
Where people were just, they were more conservative and Republican than they were anti-Trump.
But even in the primaries, didn't evangelicals like overwhelmingly support Trump over any of the other Republican candidates?
No.
Like, didn't everyone expect Cruz to be like the evangelical guy, and
most of the big name evangelicals backed Cruz.
But I'm talking more like your average evangelical
that's
person
possible.
in the. That was my understanding, but I don't have anything to back that up. That's just what I understood to have happened. That it was a surprise that Cruz did not do better amongst evangelicals.
Now, I think some of that could also just end up being that evangelicals aren't actually, like the hardcore evangelicals aren't actually that big of a voting bloc. So that might not have been all that huge at that point, but definitely was later. But Trump successfully got Christian nationalists, evangelicals, many of whom are Christian nationalists, the alt-right, and blue-collar workers. And what's even more incredible is the fact that he won not by getting more votes, but by Hillary not getting her voters.
Which was the plan all along. That's where the whole crooked Hillary thing came from. And
that's where all the Russian trolls, what they were doing was getting people who would have voted for Hillary to not vote. And they did a really good job with that, and making sure that anybody who might vote for Trump in those three groups I just mentioned, make sure they are angry and going out to vote. And it worked.
Yeah.
But one thing also interesting with this article is they covered that Dominionists don't care about democracy. It's actually against what they want. What they're wanting is like an American Taliban. So somebody who is anti-democratic, an authoritarian type, whether that person is actually giving you what you want or not, is what you want, because that's getting you one step closer to being able to get rid of the Constitution and do what you want.
Yeah, I can see that. It's
I guess it's easier to be the second group than the first group.
Yeah,
take over in that kind of sense.
The first dictator often has a short life. The second dictator usually lasts decades.
Yeah, that's messed up.
That's super terrifying.
Because you need the first coup to overthrow the government, and then you need the second to get rid of the corrupt people who overthrew the government.
Yeah, bring some stability back. That's super scary.
So with the Trump administration, with their plans to provide religious protections for healthcare workers, New York has threatened to sue if this happens.
Oh, good for them.
Yeah. And they aren't the only state. A number of states have come out very strongly against this, but New York is the one that has actually said that they will sue. And of course, as a reminder, the plan is for the Department of Health and Human Services to create a new division in their civil rights office that will be dedicated to protecting healthcare workers' religious and moral opposition to certain procedures.
Ugh. Can you hear my eyes rolling?
And then defunding most of the rest of that civil rights office.
I feel bad for the whole 3 people in that supply closet who work in the civil rights office.
So is it just that they can not do certain procedures if it's against their religion, or can they deny healthcare to certain people if it's against?
The goal is to make it so that any healthcare worker of any kind who refuses service on moral or religious grounds cannot be punished by their employer.
I feel like there cannot be that many doctors who feel that way about what they do.
This would apply to
doctors, nurses, pharmacists, registration.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess it does. It does cover a wide group of people.
Yeah,
but hopefully those people aren't getting into that kind of work to be.
There's just enough of them to have already caused some problems. So mostly it's the people who are the heads of the healthcare organizations who are then making rules that trickle down to everybody else. So even though Dustin is a non-believer, he works for a Catholic hospital, and so he has to follow their rules.
Oh, yes.
And if somebody over his head were to make a rule about something, he couldn't do anything about it.
Have you run into any of this in what you do so far, or is it not had any issue?
No issues at all, other than the annoying daily prayer and the announcement email and reflections wasting time at the start of every meeting. Often those reflections are religious, and a few awkward meetings, just in general. But overall, no, it hasn't been much of a problem. In fact, they've got a big push on, like, they're now making every patient coming into the hospital sign a acknowledgement that they understand that they cannot be refused admission because of discriminatory reasons. And there's a huge push for training and awareness of the staff that you cannot deny admission.
Good. Hopefully most organizations go that direction instead of...
Mm-hmm.
But at the same time, we have a legislature that just passed a law that forces doctors to lie to women that if they have started the 2-pill abortion, pill thing, that they can quit halfway. So, I mean, it's a give and take. It's all of those Catholic organizations, they are making some decisions that are affecting people. And this we need to protect against that, even if it doesn't happen very often.
I think you should be criminally charged if you give somebody bad or incorrect, not bad, incorrect medical advice. Purposeful incorrect medical advice.
Because of political reasons.
Which has...
or religious
around abortion happens all the time. All the time women get bad information.
Every single emergency pregnancy center that's out there. What do they call those?
Crisis pregnancy
centers. 99% of them are religious based that are giving misinformation to women to steer them away from getting abortion.
Pretty much the only ones that aren't religiously based is Planned Parenthood. And then around the rest of the Northwest, you've got Providence and Peace Health, both Catholic, running most of the healthcare organizations in Oregon and Washington. Yeah, it's big, and yeah.
And it's real. We know Trinity Health has done stuff in Michigan that has caused women to have some serious problems. I'm not sure if anybody's died as a result, but I know women have been injured as a result of their anti-abortion stance.
The death was in Phoenix at a Catholic hospital.
Well, I don't know the details of that. What happened
That
there?
one was a woman who was mid-miscarriage, but there was still a fetal heartbeat, so they refused to do the DNC. There was a shift change. The next doctor came on and was going to do it. An administrator called the bishop. The bishop called the hospital and said, "Do not do that. Discharge her." They discharged her. By the time she went back, the infection she'd picked up was so bad that she died.
See, those people should be held criminally responsible for that.
Was the bishop ever brought up in charges, or was that just it changed so many hands that they didn't blame anybody?
The only thing that happened was a lawsuit.
That's not enough.
No, not in that case.
If you want to claim to be pro-life, once a miscarriage has started, you want to make sure that woman survives and is as healthy as possible. Because that is your patient. And if you want more babies in the world, she can't make more babies if she's dead.
Not to mention she has a life too. Like she is also a life if you're pro-life. Yeah. Let's protect that one as well. It's just so infuriating that I think that the issue here is that they cannot admit that there is any amount of gray area in the pro-life movement. If they do, then they think it'll just spiral into women having abortions willy-nilly, which is like just not how it works at all. Like it's
all it takes
there is some gray
one
area.
Teenager to post something on Facebook saying, "I had an abortion this weekend.
Yeah,
it was great," or something, and it just makes them reinvigorated.
Yeah,
it's like, dude, they're eating Tide Pods too. That's just let it go.
And it's just one of those issues where I'm like, it's so easy to admit there's some gray areas there. Like there's some gray areas.
Why don't we have some actual discussion?
Yeah, let's talk about those gray areas and try and eliminate the need.
Free birth control. Fuck the patriarchy.
Yeah.
Burn it down.
Maryland and actually Oregon as well have both passed new bills banning gay conversion therapy for minors.
All right.
Good.
Oh my gosh. That is such a backwards medieval thing to have in the world.
It is. It's gross. It's terrible.
Yeah.
It's evil.
It's harmful. It's evil. It's been proven over and over that it is psychologically damaging at best.
It doesn't work.
And it doesn't work, yeah. It does not.
Despite what Pence might say.
Yeah.
One thing that was really interesting with the Maryland one was it passed the House 95-27.
Woohoo, landslide.
One of the people sponsoring this bill was a member of the legislature whose parents had sent her to gay conversion therapy when she was a kid. And so she told them about the pain she went through. Well, before the bill got to the House, her father, a state senator, had voted against the bill.
Wow. That's going to make Thanksgiving real interesting.
That's going to be really uncomfortable. My guess is that they don't have a great relationship as it is.
Yeah, that's true. That's kind of
if he sent her to gay conversion therapy and
refuses to acknowledge her pain, which is basically what that is.
Well said. That's exactly what it is. Not only does he refuse to acknowledge it, but will get in a public forum and say, "I don't acknowledge my daughter's pain."
Yep,
that's hurtful.
Major dillweed.
It's worth noting, Megan Seminaire is a Republican. When she was speaking out about this, she said the issue is not about Republicans or Democrats, nor conservatives or liberals. It's not about religious values. It's about basic human decency. It's about the fact that it's impossible to fix something that was never broken in the first place.
Good for her.
Yeah.
Because she's absolutely right.
Uh-huh.
When it comes to torturing young minds, everybody should be on board on preventing that. It's amazing how many people come out of the woodwork to defend those kind of practices.
Yeah.
And you just look at them and you're like, are you human? What is wrong with you?
Well, it's in the same, I think it's like kind of in the same category as those Mormon bishop interviews where it's like, why, in what other circumstance would you be okay with your minor child being immersed in sexual conversation with adult people like that? Like being surrounded by that sexual conversation and somebody diving like really deep into their sexuality when it's just developing, when they're as adolescents. It's inappropriate. It's incredibly inappropriate. And not only just damaging, but you wouldn't ever let that happen in any other context. But for some reason, when religion gets its hands in it, it suddenly becomes appropriate.
Yeah. And Seminaire's, her story was that she told her parents as a teenager that she liked both boys and girls. So they tried to get her gay conversion therapist. So
it's not like she was actually even dating anybody yet. No. She was just like, I think I like boys and girls. And they're like, well, guess we better go brainwash you.
Yeah. Oh, and it was Washington, not Oregon. That was the other one that had banned this. And in both cases, it's they're bans against licensed therapists trying to change a minor's sexual orientation. So it's a licensing restriction that doesn't prevent ministers who are not licensed by the state.
Right. This doesn't prevent parents from sending their kids off to some
quack.
Some quack in the woods for a couple of weeks.
And this makes Maryland the 12th state to pass some kind of law like this. California, Oregon, and District of Columbia were all previously had made moves like this. So we've now got... Not surprising. Yeah, so we've now got it illegal on the entire West Coast and a big chunk of the East Coast.
Hopefully it'll spill over into Idaho.
It's middle America that's the hard one to win over.
At least we border those.
Yeah, we won't even allow cancer kids to have CBD oil. So I don't think, there's just some things that you can't depend on neighbors.
Yeah.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Now we're surrounded too.
Now I've depressed everybody.
We still can't get it done in Idaho.
Yeah. Oregon, Washington, and Nevada. So 3 of these states' neighbors.
Colorado.
All have legal. Colorado doesn't have a border with us. Not quite.
Going through yeah, you're right. It's just slightly.
Yeah.
We got a corner. We got a corner.
No, that's Utah. Utah eats up the entire corner.
This is my public. Let me look at your map over here.
A railroad map
Colorado
from 1876.
It still looks about the same.
Yeah.
Montana, neither Montana or Wyoming, but we still got a good chunk of the Northwest all around us.
Yeah. So half of the states all to the west-ish all have legal marijuana. Montana has medical marijuana, and it's Wyoming and Utah that still don't. But as a result of some of those rules, the little town of Huntington in eastern Oregon, about an hour and a half drive from Boise,
business
has had
is booming.
Yeah, like they're able to rebuild their school because of all the extra money they have coming in from all of a sudden
so awesome.
having tax revenue.
It's so
your
good.
Kids have textbooks, have a new school. You can have individual lockers. It's like throwing money at kids. It's like weed money. Yay.
I had one of my coworkers' brothers, his daughter is like 2 now. When she was first born, she's having seizures. Like they couldn't figure out what it was. And it turned out she had some very rare genetic disease, and this would have helped. And so he was like, now I'm in this position where I can either move to Oregon and commute an hour and a half to work, or I can drive to Oregon and get it and risk losing my kid and go into... Like, that's not a good position to be in. You should not have to make that.
And the police are constantly toting how amazing they are whenever they bust people who are bringing drugs across the border. I'm like, yeah, there are other things you should be focusing on.
Right. Yeah. There are a lot of other things. They got stuff going on.
I have to paint a quick picture here. Blithe is just resting on Mary's chest. She looks like she's passed out, but every once in a while you hear these little and it's just adorable.
Those are the cute little noises that you might be able to hear in your headphones right now. Matt Barber, who is a right-wing anti-LGBT Christian blowhard, thinks that Jesus advocated for the Second Amendment.
Pretty sure Jesus had no idea what the hell that even was.
I just love it when religious people really stretch, like really just totally miss the mark on anything that Jesus said. Like Second Amendment. I've heard people say that too. Jesus was a proponent of the Second Amendment. Jesus was pro self-sufficiency. That's why we don't give. Pretty sure that's not what Jesus was about. Mm-hmm. He wasn't about guns and stiffing the poor.
No, there was
pretty
the
much
line,
the opposite, actually.
There was the line about if you have a sword, carry it. If you don't, sell your cloak and buy one. That was probably written in by somebody who was angry and disturbed later, or but even where it fits in the story is right before the end, like right before the Last Supper type time period. Most of what he had to say along those lines, turn the other cheek. That's not very Second Amendment.
Yeah, that was the kind of the big one too. Turn the other cheek.
The Bible has wonderful lines about beating your swords into plowshares. Yeah. And the head of the Southern Baptist Convention has resigned, both from his position as pastor of his church and from being president of the Southern Baptist Convention, because of a, quote, inappropriate relationship.
Sex scandal.
Yeah.
God, a part of me is glad that these are all being called out, and then the other part of me is horrified that everybody is involved in a sex scandal.
Right?
Kylie just grabbed the mic.
Kylie, can I have that back, please? No. Let go. Oh, God.
She wants to talk on the microphone.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah, but I know what you mean, Lauren. I'm like, is everyone... I feel like at this point, it's just everyone in a position of power.
I'm looking at Dustin. I'm like, yeah. Thinking about my dad.
People?
Did he?
Yeah.
About some random dude on the street. Is he?
Yeah.
It's like, oh my God, no one's safe.
I mean, that is how it feels. It's just so common, like, to hear about it now. It feels like every dude in a position of power is being inappropriate at this point.
Inappropriate.
Yeah. It's just a matter of have they been caught or not?
Oh, and heck, even if you just look at dudes in power, have they done something inappropriate in the last 5 years?
Yeah, that's true. I mean,
we're not talking about things they did when they were stupid and inexperienced or drunk at 20.
Yeah.
Or on cocaine in the 80s.
Yeah, like,
we're talking, all of these are very recent events.
Like, it's still going on.
Yeah, and like, you're talking about women also in their 40s, 50s, and 60s. It's like, you don't have it together yet. Like, you can't control your libido at that point in your life.
Never had to before. Why should he start now?
I guess that's true. That's kind of the standard.
I think that's pretty much the problem. And every single one of these Republicans that have come out against laws to help protect victims all I could think of was like, oh my God, you're a rapist and you know it and you're trying to protect yourself.
Yeah.
So I'm now convinced that 90% of our legislature, both Republican and Democrat, are rapists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Every time they talk, I'm like, rapist, rapist.
Going back to the Roy Moore story, one thing that was actually a little bit refreshing about that one is that was all stuff from like 40 years ago.
Oh, that's true. That was
At
one of the
least
few.
that one. But he was the district attorney.
Yeah.
Not. That's
I'm just saying, Batman wouldn't have put up with that.
Oh man, yeah.
And also, it's like, what else has he done in the last 40 years? Probably some stuff at the. You know what I mean? Like, if you're going to do that,
we know about.
Yeah, that's just the stuff that came out.
Yeah,
but you know that there's more. There's more because.
But I love it though.
People are like that. Aren't like that once.
And I'm hearing people's like, oh, it just happened the one time when he was young. I'm like, I know a lot of guys and almost all women who didn't. Yeah. So why is this excusable?
And he was like 30. He was my age. Okay, like there's no excuse. Like he wasn't 19 dating 17-year-olds. It would be like me dating me dating somebody my stepdaughter's age. Like that's the equivalent.
Gross.
Inappropriate and gross and unappealing. Like
burn it down.
Yeah. Don't just and nobody should have to tell you that's inappropriate too. Like they're like, oh, he didn't know it was a different time. Like, no, it's never a different time. It's always inappropriate.
It's always been gross.
It's always been gross. We've always known 30 and 14 is too big of an age difference.
Plus or minus 7 rule. You got to just go with that.
Half plus 7.
Half plus 7 rule.
Because plus or minus 7
that
can still be
sense.
Really creepy.
Yes.
All right, let's take our last break. Atheist Nomads is proudly brought to you by listeners just like you. You can find out how you can become a patron at patreon.com/atheistnomads. That's patreon.com/atheistnomads. Children from a Muslim family of Somali origin in Britain called the authorities on their parents over repeated abuse, isolation from the surrounding community, including the rest of the Somali refugee community, and attempts to turn the kids into extremists. They even went as far as to make them watch an ISIS beheading video.
That's messed up.
That is messed up.
How old was the youngest? It's like 9 or something. Insane.
Looking up the answer. 10.
10-year-old showing him ISIS beheading video.
And they called the cops on the parents.
Yeah.
Is what I'm
good
saying.
job
for
them.
them.
Oh, yes. I missed that final, the clincher, the whole, yeah. They called the cops and the kids were removed from the home because...
That's messed up.
You don't try to indoctrinate your children into the Islamic State.
And that's so easily, they so easily could have, because kids, like, when you're 9 and 10, you listen to your parents. You assume they wouldn't lead you astray.
Right.
So good for those kids who are like recognizing
this is messed up. Apparently the 10-year-old was super traumatized.
Yeah. Be traumatizing.
I bet the siblings saw that and then reacted and they're like, wait, this isn't right.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
You don't traumatize somebody's younger sibling and get away with it, even if you're the parent, especially if you're the parent.
Yeah, it totally is when the youngest or one of the youngest is, or most vulnerable is the one getting it. That's when the oldest finally will stand up. It happens time and time again. Because when it's just you're tough, you can handle it. But when it's your little brother or little sister,
yeah,
that's when you stand up and start throwing punches or calling the cops. The oldest was 18.
Which is why we'll only ever have one child, so that she'll always believe everything I tell her. Broccoli is good for you. Good for your colon.
A South African pastor who, he really liked music and singing. And so members of his church would find girls that were really good at singing, and then he would try to coach them and give them music lessons and move them into his home. And then one of the women in the house would have them go take a bath and then get into his bed, and he would rape them. And then at the end, pray, forgive us of our sins, and wash us with the blood of Jesus Christ. And then rinse and repeat.
Right, because it's a clean slate every time.
Yeah. You don't have to be
up.
Yeah, you don't have to be accountable if you can just say sorry.
I understand. Most Christians understand that that's not what that means. That's not how that works. You have to stop sinning in for all future instances.
Mm-hmm.
But there are a few people out there who are like, nope, clean slate. I can do whatever I want again. Mm-hmm. It's messed up.
I think it's people who have that kind of evil in them anyway. I think, like, who would be...
It's just their way of justifying it.
Prone to do those kinds of things to people. I think they're attracted to those kinds of religions because it's like, well...
Mm-hmm. Freebies,
yeah.
Yeah, so...
People are gross.
One of these girls, who now is 22, joined the church at 13, and he took her in at 14.
Ugh. Ugh.
Just didn't even wait a year. This is all coming to light because this church has come, and this pastor have come under the attention of the Commission for the Promotion and Protection of the Rights of Cultural, Religious, and Linguistic Communities in South Africa.
Oh.
And so they have interviewed 3 of this pastor's victims.
Wow. That's...
Yeah. He is...
I can totally see some grad student going off to Africa to help preserve cultures that are on the verge of dying and doing interviews on all these little churches and discovering something like that and going, oh my God, my life is a lie. What am I doing?
Although this commission is a government entity.
Yeah, they use grad students and interns all the time, I'm sure.
Yeah. Same principle, though. Yeah. Like, you would totally change the feeling on the work you were doing to uncover something that terrible.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Crazy sex cult like that in your backyard.
They never really don't go away, though. They just reappear in different ways. It's messed up.
Yeah.
How this was happening for years.
Mm-hmm.
How did one parent, like one mom or dad, not find out and
or the woman that was prepping them,
or the woman who's
them?
I guess when you so strongly believe that somebody's yeah. I guess if you believe that somebody is
a prophet
or whatever it was she thought he was, then maybe you justify it somehow.
You have to.
You'd go insane. But at least one person.
Well, that's
how
what I
does
thought
not
about
one person see it for what it was, and
that's what I thought about the gymnastics teams. How is it that all those parents didn't know that was happening with that one doctor, Dr. Nassar or whatever? It's like, how did that not leak for years? Years and years and years. And yet,
they all trusted him. Yeah. He was the best, so they all trusted him. Yeah.
It's upsetting.
Burn it down.
Our last story is a little bit lighter.
Yeah, we need it.
A 93-year-old avowed atheist reporter in Italy wrote an article about the Pope saying that hell does not exist.
I saw something about this across some news what do you call those news aggregation sites. And when I first saw it, I was like, well, that sounds like fake news. And then I never thought about it again. And then it was brought up again in this article. And I was like, oh my God, that was fake news. I wonder how many people actually thought the Pope said the hell does not exist.
Now, according to the author, Scalafari, he said the Pope said the disappearance of souls exists. Or excuse me, the disappearance of sinful souls exists. Meaning kind of more of an Adventist or Jehovah's Witness thought of the wicked just perish. No eternal torment. You're just gone. Now, of course, the Vatican had to go into recovery mode, and
I can imagine red sirens going off in the middle of, oh my gosh, we have another scandal.
And on Good Friday, they issued a statement saying, what is reported by the author in today's article is the fruit of his reconstruction in which the precise words uttered by the Pope are not cited. No quotations in the aforementioned article then should be construed as a faithful transcription of the words of the Holy Father. And the Pope went on to clarify that, yes, hell does exist.
Yeah, no, it was a bad article. He didn't. If you don't even use quotes when you're trying to say the Pope said something, it's like, no, nobody's going to believe this. Yeah. And I don't think anybody really did, but it caused a hilarious backlash.
Well, this keeps on happening with this Pope, where somebody says something that says that he said something that sounds really nice, and that those of us who aren't crazy religious people can actually get behind. And then the Vatican goes into cleanup mode, and the Pope issues a correction.
I know, like he's being punished.
People really want this Pope to be like the enlightened Pope, like the Pope who finally gets it. I'm like, even if he's the best Pope, he's still like just the best Pope. That's still the best he is. Like, he doesn't have much.
He's still the tippy top of the turd pile.
Exactly. Like, he still has some really, really backwards and crummy ideas about the world and the way things should be. Stop taking every little thing he says that's remotely enlightened and like, cross-stitching it and hanging it in your living room. Like, it's not...
there is only one thing that could make him not be bad in my mind, and that would be to put a stop to the routine trafficking and hiding and shuffling of pedophile priests. If he made it Vatican policy that when word comes out that a priest is sexually abusing children, that get turned over to the authorities.
Yeah.
If that was all they did, and they actually followed through with it. No, that'd be awesome.
You get a polished
turd. Because that's like the bare minimum you have to do is protect children from abuse to be decent. And if you can't do that, then...
And if they stop saying don't use condoms in AIDS epidemic areas, that would be another
they have a long way to go.
Yeah.
They've got a long way to go.
There's a lot of areas they need to work on.
Yeah.
Polished turd. Still a turd.
There could be a couple things they could...
Yeah. All right, well, anyway... On that note, Mary, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
It's been good having you back. Blithe, thank you for making adorable little sounds and generally being quiet.
That was well timed, baby.
Kylie, thank you for being good.
Thank you.
Lauren, thank you for powering through.
All right.
And listeners, remember, not all those who wander are lost. Thank you for listening to another episode of Atheist Nomads. You can find show notes and contact information at atheistnomads.com. Follow us on Twitter at Atheist Nomads, and like us on Facebook at facebook.com/atheistnomads. Please subscribe to the show in iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcatcher of choice, and while you're there, feel free to leave us a review. Theme music is courtesy of Sturdy Fred. Until next time, this has been the Atheist Nomads.